Hi everyone, for today's lesson we are going to continue discussing points, lines, and planes. You should have completed your interactive notebook, and so let's go ahead and recap on a few things from this notebook before we get started with our examples. The first vocab word that we had was a point, and in order to name a point, you need to use all capital letters. Points are usually represented with a dot, and it represents no specific dimension. It can be as big or as small as what we're talking of anything. Next, we have a line, and a line represents a straight connected path with no thickness that continues forever and ever in two directions. So we will have arrows on both ends, and there will be a bunch of dots that you can actually see. And in order to name a line, you're either going to use a cursive letter that's on the outside of the line, or any 2 points in any order on that line. We always use a line symbol just above. The next vocab word that we had was plane. And in a plane, it's represented typically by a shape that looks like a floor or a wall. And there are 3 points that you should typically see on a plane, or you'll see a cursive capital letter in a corner on that plane. Any 3 points inside of the plane can be used to name it. You can use the actual word plane, or you can just write those 3 letters connected without any commas in between. Then, of course, we have another way, which is plain J, where we would use the cursive letter. That is points, lines, and planes. The next set of vocab words that we had was segment, and a segment is a piece of a line. And the piece of the line that we're referring to is in between 2 distinct points, so A and B. And all of the values or points in between is considered a segment. Whenever you name a segment, you have to use both endpoints, but it can be in any order. So AB or BA. And we have no arrows just above it. What makes these defined terms is that there exists at least a beginning or an endpoint. Speaking of endpoint, an endpoint is the points that start or end a figure. So in a segment, there are 2 endpoints, but in an array, there is only 1 endpoint. In this case, array is a portion of a line, so it is a piece of a line, but in this case, instead of having a beginning and an end, it just has a beginning point or a starting point. That starting point in this case is the letter C, and we always have to use the letter C first whenever we are naming array. Must go first. And then any point on that array is welcome to be used as the second letter. But whenever we use the symbol is always an arrow pointing to the right, regardless of whatever direction the ray is. Opposite rays are 2 rays that share an endpoint, but together they form a line. So FG, H, all of these points together are on a line, but the 2 rays that are going in opposite directions start at G and go through F, or start at G and go through H. So in this case, we had GF and GH are opposite rays. Collinear points are 3 distinct points that are on the same line. And whenever you're naming those points, you have to separate with commas, because if you didn't have commas, IJK is very similar to how we would write the name for a plane, so be very careful. Also, we have coplanar points, and in this case, L, M, and N were all points that lie in the same plane, so therefore they are all coplanar. So we're going to use these vocabulary words to help us with our examples packet. So if you have not already printed out the first day's notes, please make sure that you do that. pause the video and make sure that you're ready to go. But I would recommend that you have something to write with for today and maybe some colors, either highlighters or colored pencils, so that that will help make the images a lot clearer. All right, let's go ahead and talk about example number 1. In example number 1, we are going to be looking at this picture over here. And it's asking us to give another name for plane Z. So as you guys can see right here, Z has no dot next to it, no solid dot. And because it has no solid dot, that is the name of a plane. And remember that in order for you to name a plane, you need 3 letters inside of the plane that can form a triangle. So if all of those points can form a triangle, then it's a valid name for a plane. So L, M, and P together, I could draw a triangle through those points. So L, M, P would be another name. Now they only asked for another, so that just means 1. But if you rearrange these letters in any order, that would be a valid name. Another name could be PNM. Another name could be NPL. NPL would also be a good one as well. They could connect and form a triangle. LMN is not a good name, and that is because they are all on the same line and they can't form a triangle together. It's a flat line. So LMN is not a good name. You need to be able to come out at that letter P. So notice that every single one of these has the letter P in the name. Name 3 collinear points. So that means 3 points that are on the same line. And in this case, L, M, and N are all on the same line. So I'm going to say L, comma, M, comma, N. And that's because we're talking about individual points. Whenever you're naming points and listing them, they must have commas in between. Now, when you're naming, this can be any order that you would like. It does not matter. Letter C says name a 4th point. So name a 4th point that is not collinear with the 3 points in part B. So a point that is not collinear is a point that is not on this line. And there are 2 points that are not on this line. Point P is not on the same line as L, M, and N. And same with point Q. Point Q is on a line with M, but it is not on the same line as L or N. Therefore, there are 2 answers here. You could select Q or you could select P. Either one is perfectly acceptable. Letter D asks, name 4 points that are coplanar. So 4 points that are coplanar, which means they lie in the same plane. And there are 4 points, 1, 2, 3, 4. L, M, N, and P. All of those points lie inside of the plane. Letter B is a lowercase italicized letter that represents the name of a line. So we would not use letter B. Q is outside of the plane and not inside of the plane. And letter Z is the name of the plane and there is no dot attached. Letter A is the name of this line going through, and therefore we would not use the letter A either. Letter E says, give 2 other names for line LN. And you know it's a line because it has arrows on each end. So any name or any point or any 2 points on this line would be considered a valid name. So like NL is a good name, or line MN, or line LM. Any of those. You could also call this line B. That would be a fine name as well. Name a point that is not, so we want a point that is not coplanar with L, N, and P. And that means that it's not inside of the plane. And so the only one that is not inside of the plane is point Q. All right, let's look at example number 2. In example number 2, we are referring to this picture. And it says, give another name for segment VX. And we know it is a segment because there are no arrows. So there's only one other name for this segment, and therefore that is XV, switching around the endpoints. And whenever we're talking about segment XV, that means we're talking about a piece of a line. So segment XV is this segment right here. It is a piece of the bigger line. Letter B says, name all rays with endpoint W. That means that whenever we're naming it, all of the rays have to start with W. The next question says, which of these are opposite rays? So let's go ahead and name our rays first, and then we'll match them with the opposite rays. So here we go. We have W and X. That is one ray. WX is going in this direction. And its opposite ray, if we were to connect and form a line, would be WV. These two rays connect and form a line. So I'm going to say that these two are opposite rays. Together they form a line. The next ray I see is WY, and that is going up. So I'll say ray WY. And going in the opposite direction is ray WZ, and together they form a line. Hold on just one second, guys. Here we go. In my classroom, the lights go out, so you might see that from time to time. Just wanted to give you that heads up. All right, so next we have give another name, and I know it's kind of tiny, but this is ray ZY. So looking at this, we are talking about ray Z going through Y. So we're talking about this ray right here. So it starts at Z and goes through Y. So whenever you're naming a ray, you always have to have the same starting point. So in this case, we start with Z, but we needed to go through another point. And another point that this ray is going through is W. So ZW is another name for ray ZY. So letter D is asking, are VX and XV the same ray? Let's go ahead and look at that. So here is X going through V and V going through X. Are they the same ray? And in this case, the answer is no. There's two reasons. Number one, the endpoints are not the same. And the rays are going in different directions. So no, the endpoints are not the same. Whenever you are talking about the same ray, you need to have same direction, same endpoint, and they don't have either. So let's go ahead and look at the next question. Are rays VW and VX the same ray? Let's go ahead and look. Here's VW and VX. Yeah, they both start at V. They're both going in the same direction. So we would say yes to this question. They are the same ray because they have the same endpoint. And travel in the same direction or go in the same direction. Awesome. All right, our last example for today is example number 3, and it says name 3 points. Let's go ahead and look at that. All you have to do is just name any 3 points. So let's look at our 3 points in this picture. I see a lot of letters, but I'm only interested in the ones that have a dot next to them. And so I see D, E, and F. So let's go ahead and name them. D, comma, E, comma, F, because we're talking about points, so we would separate them with commas. Are these points coplanar? Explain. Well, let's go ahead and look at that. Do they appear to be on the same plane? Well, it appears that this plane, if I were to use color, is kind of going through the other plane. So it looks like if I were to color it in, just of what I could see. And then here is this plane down here. It looks like D and E are in the same plane together, but F is not in the same plane. So I'm going to say no. No, the points do not all lie in the same plane. So they are not coplanar. So even though D and E might be considered coplanar, F is not. So therefore, all of these points are not coplanar. Here's letter C. It says, give another name for line P. So we know that whenever we're naming line P, we can use any 2 points that are on that line. So this case, it would be DE or line ED. And finally, our Q and R points. Explain. Well, I don't see a dot next to either one of these. So no, these are not points. Q and R are not points. Instead, they are names of planes. please be careful. It's all about having a dot right next to it. And that is the end of today's lesson. If you have any questions over anything, please feel free to email me. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day.